Okay, and then I'm gonna let it go into the next song, and then load it up. Okay. I appreciate you coming out tonight.
Yeah, no problem. I actually live in Longmont, so
oh, okay.
Closer than downtown, which I thought it was.
Okay, so we'll be a little bit late, but it'll be all right. Okay, and then
Another terrorist attack.
Yeah, right. Germany again.
Yep.
just happened.
Just
Yeah, 3 hours ago.
18-year-old kid got denied permanent placement, but was there for like a little bit, and tried to get a backpack bomb into a music festival. So,
Oh man.
and they wouldn't let him in, so he took it across the street and blew it up at a restaurant.
Wow. There we go. Wrong there. So we're gonna go in about a minute. We'll go live with the show, and we're already streaming, right?
Mm-hmm.
Hello, world. This has been Court. I'll introduce him formally here in just a little bit, but you'll hear what we do on the air as well. And then, but Ben and I are going to be talking tonight about marijuana and what I like I like the way you call it, the experiment. Okay. Okay, we're going live. And welcome to Conscious Conversations on KUHSdenver.com, broadcasting worldwide from the Mile High City of Denver, Colorado. It's Sunday, July 24th, 2016, and I'm your host, Stephen Ray Watts. So happy to be with you last hour, Sunday night, and all time zones around the world. Sit back and get ready for some uplifting, thought-provoking, and inspiring conversation. As always, plenty of music and hopefully some spiritual growth over the next 2 hours. Conscious Conversations, right here on kuhsdenver.com. So excited about this show tonight. This show proves to be, well, compelling at the very least. Maybe controversial, but I have confidence and I feel safe because we're covered by the Lord. Let us pray. Our Heavenly Father, we humbly ask that you bring us together from all over the world for the next 2 hours, united as one collective heart and soul, in the name of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ. Amen. And then this, loving Lord, I come before you in earnest prayer, asking that my imperfect life might reflect something of your holiness. Amen. Tonight on Conscious Conversations, the weed experiment in Colorado and everywhere else. Commercially, I knew I was going to mess that up. Commercialization, I'm going to stay away from that one, of marijuana. My special guest is Mr. Ben Court with CEDAR, Center for Dependency, Addiction, and Rehabilitation with Anschutz Medical Campus. Topics that we're going to talk about, some of the topics anyway, and there's so many topics. We've got so much ground to cover. Who knows where it's going to go? But I know that the Lord will direct us in the way that we need to go with this subject. Normalization of intoxication. There's that word again. Commercialization impacts health versus economy. Irresponsibility of ad campaigns. Sheer numbers of dispensaries. Connection of use to psychosis in youth. The almighty dollar versus public health. THC levels and concentrates the top 95%. And these are just some of the topics that we can delve into. I'm going to let Ben really kind of help us out and direct us on how to really how to tackle this subject. And really, when we were talking about it before the show, it is kind of, you get the politics out of it. We're talking about health, and we're talking about science, and we're talking about what the effects are on the human body and the human mind, and that's really one of the things that I'm mainly interested in, because, well, this is a show about recovery. It's a show about God's amazing grace, but it's a show about recovery. And I'm excited because this week, with by the grace of God, and one day at a time, Thursday, May 28th, I'm going to have 7 years sobriety, and I'm excited about that. And I'm going to go with what I've been taught on that, and I think that's part of Conscious Conversations. And what we do around here is that a person that I trust very much keeps telling me, but you got to give it away if you want to keep it. And so that's something I take very, very seriously. Conscious Conversations on Sunday, July 24th. I'm very excited about this show tonight because we are tackling a compelling and somewhat controversial issue. But I wanted to start it out with with scripture and also a little devotion that has to do with some of the aspects of what we'll be talking about. The center of Christ's peace. This is John 14:27. Peace I leave with you. My peace I give to you. I do not give to you as the world gives. Do not let your hearts be troubled, and do not be afraid. That's the scripture. Here's the little devotion. Few people can honestly say that they do not long for peace of mind and inner tranquility. The troubles and pressures of life can drive many to seek comfort in different things, be it tranquilizers, drugs, professional help, or even alcohol. Others simply give in to despair and just go through the motions of life. Thinly proven way to handle the problems and tensions of life is by having a faith that is steadfastly grounded in Christ. Hold on to him in all circumstances. Talk to him, and regardless of how desperate your situation might be, trust that he is always with you. His peace will then fill your heart, helping you overcome all your fears. And here's the prayer that goes with it. Prince of Peace, please help me to turn to you first in everything that happens to me today. Amen. I love that. And that is from Grace for Today, 1 Minute Devotions. When we come back, we're going to be getting into this subject of marijuana straight up here on KUHSdenver.com. Conscious Conversations on Sunday night, July 24th. Okay, we're safe. We can talk freely. We're not on radio, but we are on stream.
Okay.
So everybody. So everybody's heard me introduce Ben Court, but more formally, this is Ben Court, Manager of Business Development, Community Relations, and Admissions at Cedar. And let's kind of, did you hear some of my topics? Am I anywhere close to a good skeleton or place of where to start? Where would you like to start?
Yeah, this is good. It's already past the surface. I love the tide of recovery that we've got already. I think that the faith-based community is going to be thinking about this in a different kind of way as well. But you've got a couple of really important things there with the potency, with what we know about health, youth use. Yeah, I think we're going to get past the headlines pretty quickly, which is great.
Yeah, and the thing, there's so many different ways to take it. Let's kind of get, just for fun, let's kind of go from get it out of the political realm of, because really, is it too late? It's not too late to repeal or get it.
Repeal in Colorado is a really tricky subject. When you enshrine something in the Constitution, you do it so that it stays there.
Right.
And with one word, any president, administration, attorney general, anybody can stop it. But now that you've got so much kind of depending on it from an economic standpoint, no, Colorado, my gut here is Colorado is going to kind of keep on being the experiment, sacrificial lamb, if you will.
I like that. I like that. Because it's just true.
My hope is people just pay attention to it.
Yeah.
Like, if everybody keeps saying this is happening and this is happening, and we're actually starting to get some pretty solid data. I've got a lot of it. We can say what's happening without guessing anymore.
Right. And does it really come down to, the idea, this first topic for me is important because it's not just a thing where we've gotten used to the normalization of intoxication because every Sunday we watch football. It's all beer ads. It's all, and and that was before it got into my adulthood, before we started seeing the hard liquor ads. And but it's all about the normalization of it being intoxicated. And yet it's kind of talking out both sides of the mouth.
Yeah, we've kind of moved away from intoxication as a celebratory or a rite of passage or something that you do every now and again to something that we do, at least as Americans, like a lot.
Yeah.
And that's not really good for our brains or bodies. Leave all of the more ethereal conversations out of it as much as you want. One's spirituality and kind of one's inner peace and interconnectedness, but it's not good for our brains and bodies for sure.
Right.
We're hitting it a lot harder than I think anybody in history has hit it.
Yeah. Well, is there again? Yeah, and you have the statistics to prove that our young people are becoming. Are our young people becoming like addicts at a higher rate than ever before?
Addiction, we don't have good numbers for. Likely, yeah. I mean, we've got some of the highest rates of people seeking treatment, but for use, for sure, yeah, we lead the country now in youth use.
Of alcohol and marijuana, or
Not of alcohol. Of alcohol, we actually lead the country in 24 to 32, maybe. It's kind of one of those demographics that SAMHSA keeps an eye on.
Right.
So we do lead the country in one of the most important demographics of alcohol consumption, but we have more kids who smoke weed than any other country or state.
Wow. That's and you, Ben, you'll see me doing you'll see me doing something quite unnatural here, and that's multitask.
That's cool. I can do it too.
Uh,
There's not a huge amount of people who can. I can do it as well.
Well, that's the idea of recovery too for me is that I wonder if there was a lobby that would get in there and aggressively talk sober living, from a young age, and would aggressively advertise something like that, to our young people on TV.
The only issue with it is there's no money in it.
Yes. So there again, there's goes back to the almighty dollar wins again. I was joking with my son about that the other day, and yeah, and it's just
if there was money to be made in prevention, there'd be a lot of people preventing. I mean, there's really cool, interesting, long-term money to be made in it, but we live in a country that thinks about quarterly returns way more than we give thought to 5 years, 10 years, 15-year cycles.
right, and the idea of drinking and socializing, that's the normalization of the intoxication. It's the being cool by they're actually saying socially, being social, but the things that go along with being social. Do you believe that I mean, are they going to lobby and market, or have they already, marijuana use as the social cool like they do with alcohol?
Yeah, that's exactly I mean, that's the issue. That's what's happening in Colorado right now.
Right.
Like that's the issue. Somebody asked me at a presentation once, because it gets so political, and they said, well, if what you're saying is correct, and if the frontal lobe isn't fully developed until 25, 26, why do they let us drink at 21? And the answer to that is pretty simple. Like, it's not scientists who make the laws. It's not doctors who make the laws. It's lawyers who are guided by lobbyists. So realistically, like, the amount of trouble that we would have in this world from an addiction standpoint and problem use standpoint, if nobody got intoxicated till their frontal lobe was fully developed at 25, 26, it'd be pretty incredible.
You mean like, and I'm It would be low.
Oh my goodness, yeah. Oh yeah.
Well,
It'd be so much lower, but we don't think like that. We we think a lot more um, abstractly, I'm afraid, when it comes to science, and concretely when it comes to dollars and cents.
yeah. That's just amazing. Okay, I gotta get to my.
There's an old saying that contributes to that: if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
That's right, man.
And that's basically in every category in this damn country.
That's right.
If it don't make dollars and it don't make sense, don't mess with it no more. Oh, yeah.
What latest commercials? Oh, I did that again. Well, let's see. I'll get your commercial on D.
Oh, my computer.
Well, I'd like to begin with when we get back on the air, Ben, with this. I love the scientific of the whole frontal lobe part.
Sure.
Where you know the brain not being fully. Fully really
Right.
developed until like age 25.
25, 26. Yeah, there's an interesting way. I've got a friend who's a pretty gifted child and adolescent psychiatrist. Chris Thurstone is his name.
Uh-huh.
And he says that the easiest way to think about it is your brain has all the gas and no brakes. It's got all of the thrill-seeking, feel-good, biological, procreate, and it doesn't have any of the like thought out. A leads to B, which will lead to C. Yeah, frontal lobe is executive thought, so
Right.
like everything that lets us be thoughtful, intelligent
Mhm.
members of a community doesn't really happen until mid-20s.
Wow.
We've learned a lot.
Which makes a lot of sense because
Think about what we were doing, right?
But what I've always heard, and I've always heard that if a person doesn't begin to use or drink before they're 25, 26, the chances that they're going to abuse alcohol are very
Oh yeah,
slim.
way down, way down.
And that's but I mean now and then we want to definitely get into the idea of that the what we used to smoke because I'm 54 and what we used to try what we smoked back then where we're looking at 4%, like your article was saying. Back in those days we were looking at about 4% THC.
It's not the same drug.
It's
It's I mean, what's going on in brains and bodies. And again, I'm not a doctor, but I work with a lot of them. It's just not the same drug. And I think if this is a direction that the country wants to go in, then they really have to square up to that fact, and they've got to say, all right, like we got to stop talking about this thing for the 2,000-year-old, well, much older than that, but like this plant that people have been consuming for millennium, and we've got to start talking about it a little bit more like what it is today, which is a pretty manufactured. And when you get into the concentrates, I mean, straight up synthetic. It presents like a synthetic. It behaves like a synthetic.
really, yeah.
Oh yeah.
Wow.
Oh yeah. I can't find. I think I remember it well enough.
So a synthetic with the idea of say like heroin or like a heroin or like
More like a bath salt.
hallucinogenic.
Yeah, more like a bath salt, more like a hallucinogen. Yeah, something that's manufactured.
Right. Okay, we're gonna go
with
live.
that comes the good and the bad, because I know guys that do it the right way, the way it should be done.
Going live, and you'll be on mic. And that's Lost and Found. That's one of Dot Cero's tunes on Conscious Conversations on KUHSdenver.com. I'd like to welcome in listeners from all over the world. I'd like to welcome in listeners from Austria, Brazil, India. Canada is in strong this evening, and all over the world. We are so excited to have you with us here on Conscious Conversations this evening. My name is Stephen Ray Watts, and I'm your host on Conscious Conversations each and every week. And I wanted to invite you guys, everybody, everywhere, to check out our websites. That would be .ceroband.com. That's .ceroband.com. And then also, if you're looking for Jazz at Jack's is the establishment that I am involved with downtown in the Mile High City of Denver, Colorado. That's jazzatjacks.com, JACKS.com. And for Conscious Conversations, you want to go to www.stephenraywatts.com. That's Stephen with a PH. And I would love to have you follow me on Facebook. I'd love to have you like me on Facebook as well. That's facebook.com/Stephen Ray Watts. Stephen with a PH. So welcome, one and all. We have so much to do tonight, and I want to get right to where we're going, and that's I want to introduce my guest, Ben. Thank you for coming in this evening, Mr. Ben Court. He is Manager of Business Development, Community Relations, and Admissions at CEDAR. CEDAR is the Center for Dependency, Addiction, and Rehabilitation, and we're talking about this the weed experiment in Colorado, and we're about where to begin. And the first part that we decided to talk about is, let's talk about the reality of what this new marijuana does physically.
Sure. Well, thanks a lot for having me, Stephen. What a pleasure. And to know that there's folks all over the world listening. This is exciting. It interacts with the brain and with the body very differently than I think a lot of folks might think that it does. And what I like to say to people is unless you have purchased a THC-based product commercially within the last 3 or 4 years, probably in Colorado or California, there's a few others who are about as good as we are, you're probably thinking about a substance that's very different than what we are consuming today.
Yeah, and that's huge, because what we smoked back in my day, we were talking about it, probably maybe 4% THC.
Maybe, yeah.
Yeah, and different strains and things like that. But now we were talking about, and this has become it's close to a synthetic, and we're talking a drug.
Yeah, well, we certainly would say that the synthetics are the concentrates are much closer to a synthetic than they are to anything else. And even just the weed of today, with how strong it is, I got sober back in 1996, and weed was a pretty big part of what I did. And even in Washington, D.C., where it was really good stuff. It was all below 10%. Now, Colorado's seeing upwards of 40% THC in the flower. Of course, THC is the part that gets you high.
Right.
Naturally occurring inside of cannabis, and you can use that word for it now, is probably somewhere between 0.2 and 0.5% THC. So when when I sit down and have a debate with somebody, or when I do a show and it's less friendly and people want to challenge everything, that hey, what I quoted to my dad again and again when I was at the end of things for me, which was reminding him that Genesis 1:12 said we get all the seed-bearing plants and herbs to use. What God made and put on this earth was 0.2 to 0.5% THC.
Oh, I love that you said that, dude. I love that's out there, because I'm a biblical guy, and that's cool. But the thing is, really, how do we put this into perspective on a recreational use? Why does it have to be so strong if it's for recreation? I mean, is it the difference between? I guess I'm relating because my drug of choice when it got into my addiction was alcohol. So I mean, I can see where you got to the point where beer wasn't doing it, and then I went to. Do you see where I'm going with that, Ben?
Sure. This is a little different than the comparison, beer to distilled liquors. And I'd be more than happy to kind of cover that if you'd like to at some point. But the answer to why it has to get so much more potent is economics 101. And this just keeps coming back to follow the money, follow the money, follow the money. We were just talking in the studio here, and I was reminded of a great quote: if it don't make dollars, it don't make sense.
Yeah.
And the reality is, with somewhere around 380 dispensaries in Denver proper, in the city limits, everybody's selling the same thing, and everybody's selling it for about the same price. So how you're going to differentiate yourself from the guy directly across the street from you doing it is more THC for your buck. So that's what's happened. It's been this like total arms race in Colorado.
Wow. Yeah, it only makes sense. Yeah, that really is a logical thing that I'm embarrassed that I didn't even think about, but it makes sense because, and then you were saying, and this is something, I think the appropriate time to interject this, how many dispensaries do we have in Colorado?
Well, in Colorado, we know that there's about 2,300 licensed facilities. Now, those are dispensaries, grow operations, and distributors. Colorado as a whole, I can probably look that up maybe when you get a song. I brought all my papers with me, but we know that Denver is just shy of 400. If you add all of the McDonald's and Starbucks in Denver city limits, there's about 100 more marijuana dispensaries.
Oh man, that's an amazing way of putting it.
Isn't that crazy?
Well, when you gave me that stat the other day, of 370 or just in that range, I honestly thought that was for Colorado. I didn't think that was just for Denver. But I mean, it doesn't shock me at the same time. But when you put it up against McDonald's and Starbucks, my son and I were joking around the other day about things like this, and we were talking about, well, this is the problem is that it is economics. It's bought and paid for. It's the almighty dollar wins again, and the problem is that, but they're getting rich, and there's the demand, right?
Oh, there's the demand, and I mean the real trick to it, and my big issue, and the reason why I'm willing to leave home and get in the car and drive out at 10 o'clock on a Sunday night is it's more than just the simple economics of supply and demand. When you have an industry like this that is unchecked, and they are unchecked. I mean, we give a lot of nice lip service to the way that we're regulating in Colorado. I'd love to get into the details about that. The problem is that we are continuing to create need. The only way that you can have growth like what we've had in this business is if you do two things. You have to convert current users to more frequent users, and you have to capture new users. And just like what we've learned with tobacco, the best users and the ones who stick around the longest are the youngest, and then unfortunately typically the most economically disenfranchised.
Wow, that to me says a lot. And the fact is again, uh, it's this recreational use as opposed to, before it was legal here. I knew a number of people who had their medical cards and were using in marijuana for a number of medical uses. Uh, and then I've heard, you hear all the arguments about, how well it works on autism and or other things like this. But this isn't the same. Is it the same drug?
It's the exact same drug. So if you go into a dispensary and and if you have a red card, a medical card, you literally just pay at a different counter than if you don't. Now there are some products that are pretty specific to a few conditions that are higher CBD and much lower THC. So CBD is where there's a lot of components inside of marijuana.
Mm-hmm.
CBD is where the most interesting medicinal qualities are found. THC is the part that gets you high. So
Right.
the more CBD you have, the more medicine. It's a little of an oversimplification, but for the most part, that doesn't really sell. And what we are seeing, what we know for sure is there are some interesting medicinal implications. Unfortunately, there are some people who are putting this out in a form that's not kind of full of pesticides and made in some dude's garage. But we have seen a real help for severe cases of MS. So it looks like a high CBD helps with spasticity.
And it's administered through smoking. No, it's administered a different way.
There's not a medicine on earth you smoke, period.
Well, there you go.
What there are lots of medicinal qualities inside of. So I've got a buddy who says I could probably get some pain relieving and fever relieving effects from chewing on hemlock. I prefer aspirin. So it's this trick between giving in to big pharma, who, I mean, yeah, they suck.
Yeah.
Between giving into them or just being completely natural, the reality is very few things are in their finest medicinal form in nature.
Well, we're gonna keep on this trek. I'm on a quest to try to stay organized because there's so much information here that I want Ben to give us, and so I'm going to keep working on that. We've got some music coming up from Gracie Vandiver and friends, and we'll be right back with more Conscious Conversations on KUHSdenver.com. And we're clear from.
Oh, fine. Thanks for the quote.
Yeah, I gotta agree with you on that though. Anybody who smokes that shit is just in it for the buzz.
Oh yeah, I mean, it's you look at the average card holders, like it's not sick and dying age, and no one cares, man. If you're 70 and you got cancer, even if it's not helping, get high. Who cares?
Yeah, I mean, if it's like or have a drink.
Who cares? Do it. But the problem is the average age in Colorado is 32.
Yeah.
The other thing that comes up, there's been enough. I know a gal that has fibromyalgia,
Mm-hmm.
and she, the doctors are telling her that there's two things, and there's no old long timer that I know that the doctors are telling her, if you want to get high, and if you want it to go away, and even as another guy had, my old guy had like 46 years sobriety. He didn't want to change his sobriety date, because he had horrible shingles, and I don't know if the medicinal qualities, or if it's just the difference between the actual medicinal qualities or as a pain reliever.
You nailed it. So this was the most challenging part. I wrote a book about this whole thing. It was the most challenging part to write because you want to respect the fact that there are a lot of people in a lot of pain who, if they're getting relief, whatever. But the comparison to the snake oil of the 18th, 19th century is perfect. Like, it's a 90 proof, and the example that I finally settled on was if you got a toothache and you get drunk, your tooth isn't going to hurt anymore, but the decay is still going to be there. This is not fixing his shingles. Shingles is a virus.
Right.
It's not fixing his shingles, but it might make him hurt less. So the FDA has actually got an interesting rule in the way that they consider all medication. And it's fun to say it's less, worse than. So if a medication has less harmful side effects than the next in line, then it could be the first in line. So you can't just consider the advantages to any medication. You got to look at the detractors as well. And then the big scary thing, which we'll never have time to talk about, and you can't get into it, is the drug-drug interactions. So this is what we pay doctors, especially psychiatrists, so much to teach us is like, we know just what's happening inside of your brain when two drugs go together. Sometimes it helps, sometimes it makes it a lot worse. This is getting to be an incredibly powerful substance. And
Yes.
the issue is it's contraindicated for the treatment of several conditions that it's starting to be recommended for. And it gets a little scary to think about what's happening inside of somebody's brain and body when this high potency THC is maybe interacting with their antidepressant or their the drug that they're taking for their schizophrenia or for their heart condition or for their blood pressure. So to say medical is even tricky because it gives people sort of the idea that it's been vetted. There are two that have been vetted, Sativex and Marinol, and very, very interesting drugs. Very interesting drugs, but they don't get you high.
Right. And they're, yeah, and it's like, yeah, and it's not administered through smoking.
It's a sublingual.
Yeah.
Little sprays, and what ended up happening was with Marinol, they put the entire plant into a spray formula, just a really low THC because I forget what they call it, but it's turned political. The idea that if you just take out the CBD, then it actually doesn't do as much good, which again would be the only plant ever like that. But to kind of give the benefit of the doubt, they put everything into a spray, and it just is taken like you don't smoke it. And neither one of these guys, like we have, it's on FDA fast track approval right now, Sativex, and they can't sign people up for it. So you can't get enough paper to print medical cards in states that have it.
Right.
They can't sign people up for this like actual FDA approved pending, really safely put together, dose controlled. That's the other thing. There's not, if you say take as much as you want, as often as you want until you feel what you want, like to come back to your original point, we have found an intoxicant that serves a purpose in the world and in medicine and the like take a couple stiff drinks before they chop your leg off.
Well, yeah. What I mean, I know, I hope I'm not jumping from, with that said, I mean, the medical, where do you stand on, for instance, like a sobriety standpoint? Would you say, you know, there's the age-old marijuana maintenance, and there's, you know, is it just a different drug of choice, or are some, would the alcoholic be able to use a drug? I guess I'm looking for the addictive. How addictive would the alcoholic be able to use an addictive drug like marijuana with, as say a normal person would, with moderation?
I mean, the question then is like, can the alcoholic take opiates after a surgery? Can they?
Yeah.
And you know, we've all. My answer to that, I think, is going to be super, super specific and personal, because I always get nervous of 11th tradition stuff anyway out there. Like, for me, definitely not. For anybody I would sponsor, I would give them a hard no on that.
Yeah.
And now, I have had a lot of broken 34 bones. Like I've had a lot of injuries in sobriety.
Mm-hmm.
One of those injuries, I ended up on opiates for 2 weeks, and I didn't get much of it back. I took half what I was prescribed through it, and
Yeah.
such an individual.
Yeah,
thing.
and I like the way you put that too, because one of the things I wanted to say to the listeners out there, one of the things I've learned from doing this radio show is there's a person's sobriety is very it's very personal. It's what works, you know. And you have to develop and live a program that's going to work for you, and that's it's very important. So, but
Well, the thing I have
I'm the other way. I'm like that too. I just couldn't do it.
I couldn't either.
Yeah. So
But the thing I found about my sobriety, at least, and again, I mean, we each put together a couple 24s with it. Like, it's not even about abstaining. That's not it. It's about conscious contact.
yes.
Like, it is about my connection here with my fellows, and it's about my connection with my higher power. And what I find for me is that mood altering substances get in the way of that. And anything can. Spending can. I know people who are ruined with pornography and like,
Right.
and for some people it's not a big deal. And for me, no, anything that's going to change my mood, change my like, I need to be okay with who I am.
That's such a huge point. I hope you we get the opportunity to you know, that we can reinforce that with within, you know, the next segment, because I think that's important, because one of the things that we're trying to do, what I'm trying to do with conscious conversations, is get people who are maybe on the fence of deciding, well, what do I do? Do I have a problem here, or you know, should I seek help? Is it going to be okay if I do? And also, or those loved ones, those loved ones that are trying to find help for their person who's addicted.
I know a
So,
bit about that. I know a lot more about that than I do about the idiosyncrasies of medicinal.
well, I love the idea, and it's so great because you know you get a person with sobriety, the one there's a constant with a person that has long-term continuous sobriety, and that is that conscious contact with God, or higher power, your spiritual person, that your being that you trust. So I love that, and we'll keep going with that. You know, I'm there. It's just one of those subjects, Ben, where you know I've got so many things to ask. I do want to get into this on the next radio segment right after we get through. We got one more song, and then we got two quick commercials. But let's get into this medicine versus pain relief. But let's get also into the age of use.
Sure.
That we and the frontal lobe. That's because that's fascinating to me.
I'm also particularly interested in just found my numbers, but I love talking about the social justice aspect of this because it is so driven it, and we actually share a faith, and so a big part, one of my favorite reads of all time was Rich Christians in an Age of Hunger, and the importance, and Christ is a fairly radical agent of social change as well, like these dispensaries, these businesses, I don't have a single one in my well-to-do upper middle class white neighborhood. Globeville in Denver, that's 93% Black or Hispanic. There's one dispensary for every 47.
Man, we got to go there on this.
And arrest rates too. White arrests way down. Black and Hispanic arrests way up.
Is that because of I mean, forgive my my ignorance, but is that because of use or targeting?
Everybody actually uses about the same. It's because where the dispensaries are, and I'm sure targeting, but targeting has been so consistent then that to show these trends, like that hasn't changed. The only thing that's changed is the commercialization. And if you have way more commercial outlets in economically disenfranchised neighborhoods, then do the math on it.
We need to just jump right on that then.
That's one of the most important ones.
Yeah, let's jump right in. What was the term you used on that again?
Social justice.
Well, yeah.
Yeah, Alaska's the same. What happened in Alaska is the same thing. You had the native, they don't refer to themselves as natives, they refer to themselves as First Peoples in Alaska. A
Wow.
huge coalition. In fact, the first endorsement for the No campaign in Alaska was the Northwest Tribal Council, which represents all of the tribes up and down that seaboard. And they came out adamantly opposed. And what ended up, and actually the chairman for the campaign was a native Alaskan, 7-time Iditarod champ, 25 years sober, really neat guy.
Wow.
And then the head of the Yes campaign was a suit from Seattle. And so you had, like, again, this whole, you guys don't know what's best for your communities, we know what's best for your communities. White folks own the shops, sell it to whoever they want to.
Wow. This is so.
That story's starting to get told. We're starting to see that data. We're starting to see
Yeah.
that data, but people have to look for it. And there's been this kind of long-standing idea. My personal feeling, and I could put this in the book, I don't say a lot publicly, I think that it's a detractor from the big issues. I think that what we end up doing is chasing the sneeze and not talking about the cold, like we were talking about disproportionate arrest rates, and then one particular subject. What we're not talking about anymore now is institutionalized racism that exists inside of the judicial system, why every prosecutor looks like me, why every judge looks like me, and how anybody's supposed to get a fair shake through that. 80% of the cops in this country are white. Like, that's the conversation. The conversation is not arrest rates for one particular thing, because it's across the board.
Right. Well, and that's a huge blanket over a subject that has so many different avenues to it. But basically, until you can write that, then you can't even begin. You know, the other things they can be talked about, but change has got to come from basically something that you don't maybe even realize, and that's why we have to talk about it.
And real social change too.
Right.
Because, so if we know that use rates are higher and higher the closer you are to retail, we know this for sure. And the farther out you get, then you got to start to follow it down a little, which the average person won't do, unfortunately. But the more somebody uses, the less likely they are to graduate from college, to the more they use, the more likely they are to end up welfare dependent, et cetera, et cetera. There's some really cool studies that are, but we know this. And so if you've got more and more dispensaries in more and more disenfranchised neighborhoods where graduation rates are already lower, where college attendance rates are lower, it's not helping this situation.
It's just like, I mean, it's even deeper than it's just fascinating to me. I mean, it's
I think it's a big one, but I think it's more indicative of the day and age too, with intoxication being fairly normal. A couple of years ago, Colorado had 3 rehab programs. I couldn't tell you, 30 probably.
Yeah. Wow. Well, and the thing is, it's like I use my son as a judge, you know, and luckily my son just turned 26, and he, you know, I think maybe because he grew up, you know, with an alcoholic father, you know, he just decided that this is going to be part of my my life, and I think he's got a better chance now.
Oh my goodness, yes.
We're going live, and so, you know, I'd like to start it off with just the 25 age thing, move it into the social
Cool.
justice thing. I'm going to let you kind of roll with it.
Okay.
Ben, you're going to hear 2 commercials after this, and then
Oh.
well, there'll be a little bit of a mic break, and I'll mention something, then I'll hand it off to you. Going live. And you're listening to Conscious Conversations on KUHSdenver.com. Welcome, Huntington Beach, United States, Draper, United States, also Redondo Beach, United States. The beaches are in the house. They're listening to Conscious Conversations. That came out all wrong. If you want to think about the way secular speech these days, but welcome to them anyway. India, Indonesia, I guess you got to laugh too. It's a good thing that we can. And I want to welcome again my guest, my special guest, Mr. Ben Court. This evening we're talking about marijuana and all the things that is involved with it. We brought up, while we were talking on the streaming, we were talking about social injustice and also just the idea. I want to have you roll with this, Ben. The idea that people that do not use before the age of say 25, 26 are much less likely to use at all. And the idea being that, you know, that the frontal lobe of the brain is not developed fully until that age.
Yeah, that holds true for just about every mood-altering substance, every intoxicating substance. The caveat I would throw in there is if a physician specifically tells you to do something, then it's fine. You know, kids ask all the time, well, my doc put me on an antidepressant, or I'm not a doc, I'm not saying that. I'm talking about intoxicants, and particularly ones in which you decide the dose and duration and frequency. Yeah, a person's frontal lobe is not fully developed until they're 24, 25, 26. 26 is pretty safe. And if everybody in the world would just wait until they were 26 before they would start to alter their brain chemistry with anything intoxicating, we'd have a lot less issues. We'd have a lot less issues with addiction, with what the CDC refers to as associated deviant behaviors that or go hand in hand with being intoxicated.
Right, and that's just well said, and it's just there. Boom. I mean, and it's been proven.
Yeah, this is one of these ones where I'm not talking opinion or anything, that there's a lot of good data that indicates, like, we know enough about brain chemistry because we've been looking at people in MRI machines doing things for long enough now. We can tell you for sure, like, sorry kids, if there's anybody out there under 26 who's listening, like, it's just not all the way there yet. The good news is it's going to get better, but
Right.
is a very dear friend of mine, a doctor here in Denver, adolescent child psychiatrist, Chris Thurstone is his name, likes to say it's like having the gas pedal without the brake pedal. And once that frontal lobe's fully developed, things change a lot.
Yeah, and I guess, and it's part of growing up, I guess, is putting it in ultra layman's terms. It's part of maturing in ultra layman's terms. That the fact is, but you have to think about the fact that that is the truth. Let's get into this social justice, social injustice about where these dispensaries are, and the big picture of how this is all playing out, especially here in Colorado, but soon in other places.
So the Denver Post broke a pretty incredible article recently, and the title of the article, I think I'll remember until I go to my grave, was "Most Dispensaries Located in Poor Minority Neighborhoods." And this is one of these things where I read it and I'm like, seriously, we're finally saying this, because we've had this idea all along that what we're going to do with this is we're going to reduce incarceration, and by reducing incarceration, we're going to do a whole lot to help out minority communities who are disproportionately incarcerated for everything, not just for this, for everything.
Right.
In reality, in the well-to-do upper middle class neighborhood where my beautiful wife and I are raising our 3 kids, not a dispensary in sight, closest one's 8 miles. You go into Globeville in Denver where the median income is $17,000 a year, and there's 1 dispensary for every 47 residents there.
See, now that's real. I mean, are you hearing that? That's a fact.
How about this fact? This is one of the ones that people should be up in arms about, particularly folks who care about the more disenfranchised communities, which I think, if your listeners believe the things that I believe, and I think that they believe, we're called to care about. You had, in the 2 years since commercialization, this only goes up through 2014, you had a 8% reduction in all juveniles arrested for marijuana-related offenses who were white. So white kids, 8% less arrests. Black kids, 58% increase. Hispanic kids, 29% increase. Less white kids are getting arrested. More black kids and Hispanic kids are getting arrested because the dispensaries are in their neighborhoods. And so for those of you who love to fact check, that was in the marijuana legalization in Colorado early filings, a report pursuant to Senate Bill 13283 published in March of this year.
Wow.
Right?
Yeah, that's sobering. It has to do, again, with the idea that one group is determining what's good for all groups. Am I right on the path of that a little bit?
Spot on. And you know who that group is? White guys with money. So consider this. You can't get a loan to start a marijuana business. If you want to walk into the bank and say, all right, look here, I need $250,000 for product, and I need $2 million for rent for the first year, and I need employees, and they're going to laugh you right out of there. And they can't give a loan to knowingly violate federal law, no matter what kind of collateral you put up against it. They can't do it.
Right.
So the only people who are opening up dispensaries are people who had a lot of money to begin with. So you got folks borrowing it from families, and then also the way that all the laws are written, anybody who's ever been arrested for just about anything can't be in the business at all. And since minorities are disproportionately arrested for everything, what you've got in Denver is a bunch of white guys who came from money, who own dispensaries, and are now consolidating those dispensaries. My favorite's this guy named John Lord, who was a cattle baron over in New Zealand. and moved here and somehow got citizenship because he couldn't own these dispensaries if he didn't. And he owns Live Well, which has a bunch of sub brands underneath it. And so I think he's the largest holder in Colorado, but the guy owns about 30 stores now.
Oh, yeah. Wow. And that just says it all. I mean, it just is about it is about the almighty dollar.
Yeah. If
Yeah.
we would move away from, there's so many complexities inside of this conversation. We touched on a little in medicinal, and if we talk economics, and there's so many complexities. And a good, solid conversation on this takes 6 hours. I do a training in.
Goodness, I think that's why I'm feeling so uneasy, Ben, because I just feel like I'm in way over my head on all the. I mean, there's so much I didn't even think about, you know.
Well, we learn in the rooms KISS, right? Which for those of you, I'm by no means calling Steven stupid, but they tell us, keep it simple, stupid.
Right.
That's how we say sober one day at a time. And for this one, for me, the keeping it simple, just come back to the economics of it.
Yeah.
Like if this was about anything other than economics, you would have co-ops, you would have total non-for-profits, you would have no commercial industry. You wouldn't have, we know of for sure 32 full-time registered lobbyists in the state of Colorado who are advocating on behalf of the marijuana industry. They've got K Street lobbyists in Washington, D.C. Like if this wasn't about the money, you wouldn't have the DPA, the MPP, the Marijuana Industry Association. It's all about the money. So
Yeah.
Keep it simple.
Well, and the thing is, I was driving home last night, and I was coming up Colfax over right by Mile High Stadium, and then took a right on Federal. And there it was. It's a big old billboard, about the cannabis convention. And I'm going like, wow, man, that's that powerful. That is the lobby as powerful as tobacco lobby.
Not yet, but it's working on it. Actually, some of the same players, and there's just not enough money yet. And again, this is why I'll get up and drive down here on a Sunday night. Is I think that there's a short window. I think if any of us could go back 150 years and fight the tobacco lobby, we would be doing it. Because in reality, people are going to smoke cigarettes, and in reality, people are going to smoke weed, and they're going to do all sorts of illicit drugs. And I am not their judge, and it's not up to me to wave a finger. I'm a recovering drug addict. I don't get to wave fingers. But what I can do is fight what I see as kind of the next big tobacco. And so this isn't about you getting high. If you want to get high, get high. The problem is this is about you putting 15 dispensaries in a poor neighborhood that has an under 50% graduation rate to begin with anyway.
Mm-hmm.
That's the issue with it.
Right. And it is huge. I mean, it goes way beyond the medicine, the medicinal as opposed to pain relief. And then we touched on just getting back to the physical and scientific ideas of drug to drug interaction due to the fact that that the THC is so strong. And it's just mind blowing, how far-reaching this subject, is. And one of the things I wanted to ask you about also is that, it goes into the social experiment of just how many people are now in Colorado, and the glut of people, the housing market, I'm going to ask you when we come back about, have there been studies done on because we're talking there's angry people out there, Ben, and I don't know if it has to do with the drug or not. When we come back, we're going to talk more about all the issues, and I'm going to kind of let Ben drive this starship because it's got me a bit befuddled, but I'm enjoying the conversation.
Pretty much all I do is think about this. So.
You know what? It's like, they because they say, I mean, pot was always supposed to be like kind of a relaxing thing.
Yeah.
But I mean, these young people they're aggressive. is it just me? Am I getting
No,
older?
it does present more like a synthetic. So anything that, yeah, I would tell you sub 10%. Yeah, that's Cheech and Chong stuff. That's like, okay, whatever. Like, that's whatever. And I think it's going to interact with different people differently. And there's not blanket statements you can make about it, but we know that we absolutely know that as it increases, so increases psychosis. As potency increases, psychosis increases alongside of it. So psychosis typically it's loud. It tends to be a little bit more on the violent side of things. Now, it's not liquor. Like, it's not, people typically don't smoke weed and go home and beat their wife up. However, psychotic episodes and psychotic breaks, we've had some infamous ones in Denver already from this. It does happen. And people with pre-existing mental health conditions, it's way different than, okay, so take the person who has maybe some psychosis that's brewing down there, or take somebody who has some schizophrenia that's down there, and you throw a high potency THC into the mix, and something that might have laid dormant, you've just thrown gas on a spark. And alcohol is actually really different than that. Is alcohol is a depressant, and while a lot of people get violent from it, it's typically a ratio thing. So many more people consume alcohol than weed or any other illicit substance. Of course, you're going to have more issues associated with it.
Right.
But
Right.
You can't. Concentrates, whole different drug. It is not. We know so little about them, but what we see is people present considerably more like a synthetic, which is kind of scary and aggressive.
Right, and it that makes sense to me. What about overdoses?
Overdose is a really interesting word. So when we say the word overdose, most of us think about somebody dying from, right? You shoot too much heroin and your heart stops. And a coroner might classify something like that as respiratory failure, or they might classify it as an overdose.
Complications due to.
There are a couple of credible enough to make them interesting case studies where people died right after ingesting significant amounts of THC. More than likely, that's coronary stuff. It's vascular stuff. It's somebody had a heart attack and it's so small that they would be crazy one-offs that you could never talk about. What overdose actually means is like any sort of adverse, unplanned reaction to. So if you use that the way that the hospital uses it, and we've got all the data here, like overdoses are up in the well above 1,000% year over year. From people, that's people who are checking into the hospital saying, I'm not right, and it's weed that did it. But the problem is when we say the word overdose in today's vernacular, we think that means dying from. Like, that doesn't happen.
Yeah.
I mean,
right.
it has happened, but it doesn't happen.
Right. Well, and then, one of the things I read, I really, when I read your, two people checked in, they were describing what, the psychosis they were feeling, and you said that in there that there's a word for that. That they didn't know that there's a word for it. I'm trying to find that exact quote from you.
It's cannabis-induced psychosis.
Okay.
And it's really, HIPAA gets in the way of all the really good stories working in the hospital-based treatment. But I'll tell you the stuff so we've admitted the last 4 months now, we've admitted more patients for THC dependence than we have for opiate dependence, which is crazy.
Yeah.
And it's all voluntary. We don't take anybody who's mandated. That's nuts. But you have folks who come in and they're like, yeah, I think it could be the weed, I think. And then they're describing, like, textbook describing cannabis-induced psychosis, and they just think, I haven't been feeling right. I'm not doing so hot. I think there's something wrong with my brain, too.
Is it something like this goes way beyond like what when I was in high school and I got high, and one of the reasons I quit getting high is because I hated the paranoia. You know, there's this thing that used to happen is I used to call it the shadow. They'd just come over me and I hated it. So all my friends were loving this feeling and I'm going, well, you can have it. So I just went to my drug of choice.
It's a good alcoholic.
You know,
You had some pre-existing mental health conditions more than likely, and this flared some of them up. Well, as
Yeah.
proven by alcohol.
Absolutely.
So what happens is like it fans the flame a little bit. I was the same way, and that is a shadow of like it is acute today. I mean, violent reactions, acute paranoia and schizophrenia.
Mm-hmm.
Which is, again, from weed to say acute paranoia associated with that, like 15 years ago, we were like, yeah, there was a guy in Kansas once, or I heard about a case study in Canada. And now, I mean, we've got 4 people right now on the milieu experiencing that.
Wow.
Out of 30.
Well, and you know, I had a friend that, the drummer in my group said he I can't remember if he saw this on TV or if he witnessed a person, but he said a guy did an edible or something and he didn't know what he was gonna, and this guy literally freaked out. I mean, and he said I told me I'm not, I don't want to go there. He said it's a different thing.
Well, the issue with the edibles are the serving sizes and the dosages. So if Colorado law, it was a fairly arbitrary assignment. A lot of people were arguing for 5 milligrams instead of 10, but Colorado law says that you can only have 10 milligrams of THC per serving in an edible.
Mm-hmm.
So here's a question for you. With that in mind, 10 milligrams of THC equals 1 legal serving. How many THC-infused gummy bears do you need to eat to get 1 legal serving? Spitball it. What do you feel like a serving of gummy bears is?
It depends on how much of it you use. If you're fresh to the game, you don't want to go more than 1.
Oh, you would, yeah.
But if you're someone who's been doing it for a long time, like myself, I have a red card. I use it for. I'm more into the CBD thing, not the THC. But I've seen people like that ain't really educated in it go for the gusto, and because they're the glutton type of people
freak
that.
Out.
Yeah,
and food freaks people out.
Yeah, it's the same guy. It's that same guy that would go into a bar and probably drink 15 shots and think he can handle it.
Well, the problem is now those 15 shots are put into something like this.
Yeah.
There's gummy bears in Colorado that have 100 milligrams per gummy bear. So 10 legal servings in 1 gummy bear.
Yeah,
so what your friend probably did was he probably ate a cookie that, again, if we're triaging and if we were doing harm reduction, which is the point we're at right now, we're telling people, all right, eat, don't smoke, don't do any of it, eat, don't smoke.
Right.
But then if you're going to eat it and if a cookie has 80 milligrams in,
you're going to freak out.
You're going to freak out. You're going to freak out.
Yeah.
I know that. I've done that a couple times.
Edibles?
A little cookie like that, and I'm thinking, well. No.
Of course, who doesn't eat a cookie?
Yeah.
And then you eat the whole cookie?
Yeah, who takes a little nibble of a cookie like that?
Exactly. Well, you know who might do it? is somebody who's thinking about it, somebody who's responsible, somebody who's maybe had his red card for a long time.
That's
you know
me.
who doesn't?
Yeah.
Kids.
Yeah.
And that's the problem.
I feel you on that.
They're like, oh, a gummy bear.
Yeah. Right. And if you're like,
and they're like, what is that little gummy bear going to do to me? But they don't know what's actually in
the
that
amount of THC in it.
Yes.
Here, I can give you the hospital admission.
Yes, I truly agree with that.
Okay, here we go. 2001 increase. So 803 to 2,413. That is. There's a triple-digit increase. That's to 2014. 2015, we had better numbers. So ED visits, where they cited marijuana as the only issue, went from 739 to 956. Oh, and that's only till June. Poison control went from 44. Poison control calls for marijuana poisoning went from 44 to 227.
Well, let's begin there, Ben, as far as, is that a good place to start as far as, the idea that I really, first of all, where can people get your book?
Well, it's not out yet. It's
Okay,
publisher back.
right, okay.
Nonsense. It's getting close.
Well, I'll be looking forward to it.
Well, I'll send one over as soon as it comes out.
Yeah, but the idea of you're seeing more people come in with marijuana addiction than even
Than
opiates.
opiate.
Yeah. Is that a good place to start?
Sure.
Okay.
And opiates are this huge. Well, the thing about opiates is they can kill you anytime. This is just different. This is just way different.
I actually think where they screwed up with this whole marijuana thing was all this hybridal thing that they're doing.
The what?
The hybrids they're making.
How so?
Where they're crossing indicas with sativas and
Oh yeah.
different strains that don't really counteract, and just to get that. And it's like you said, for that THC, that higher buzz.
If you let just seeds do it, we would never be above 10% because the amount of good botany it would take to get there would be crazy.
Yeah,
The problem is it's science
it's on a
now.
genetic
Yeah,
level.
Yeah.
and it's just
Yeah.
the whole synthetic thing.
It really is GMOs.
Yep, it's on a genetic level.
Again, like, who cares about a plant? It's not a plant.
Going live, y'all. That's I Am They with You Awake My Love. And you're listening to Conscious Conversations right here on KUHSdenver.com. And I want to start off with something that's very important, another little devotion. It seems like a good time for it. So grateful to have Mr. Ben Court in studio with me this evening talking about the marijuana issue, and especially the marijuana issue in Colorado. But I want to start with this: God's sufficient grace. My grace is sufficient for you, for my power is made perfect in weakness. And that is 2 Corinthians 12:9. All of us at one point or another, when faced with a certain situation, feel hopeless and defeated. Yet whatever the predicament you are in, however dark the outlook, never underestimate the extent of God's love for you and the expanse of His grace. Look at examples in the Bible or in history when God transformed despair into hope and defeat into victory through His grace. He is waiting for you to turn to Him and trust Him. Your faith will be rewarded, and in His own wonderful way, He will deliver you. And here's a prayer to go along with that. Strong. It makes me feel good. God, through the years, you have proved yourself to be faithful. Therefore, I will hold on to your hand in the future because your grace is sufficient for me at all times and under all circumstances. Amen. And that is a substitute for the things that we've been talking about in recovery on this show. Ben, we're going to get started on, well, where do we start on this segment? It's a grab bag.
Yeah, this is such a huge one to tackle. All right, so I can tell you a little bit about treatment. You mentioned that I work at a place called Cedar. Cedar is actually a service line of the University of Colorado Hospital. So we are kind of the good guys in treatment. We're nonprofit. We don't take people who are forced into it.
Right.
It's a major academic institution where we like to study as much as we like to treat. One of the really wild things that we've seen over the last couple of months has been actually more patients voluntarily seeking treatment for THC dependence than for opiate dependence, which if you'd have told us that 10 years ago, everybody just would have laughed.
Yeah.
Because it was not a thing. Because again,
at 10% or even below 5%, addiction rates for this substance are really, really low. It's about a 1 in 9 for an adult and about a 1 in 6 for a juvenile will ever develop a clinically diagnosable or meet the diagnostic criteria for addiction.
Right.
But what's happened, and one of the interesting things we learned from this recent report, and talking data tracking would be fun, I'll hit on that for a minute, is that 33% of all of the users in Colorado admit to using daily.
Wow.
So this is a really big deal.
Yeah.
Right. So this kind of comes back to the old 80-20 rule we know about liquor sales, which is that 80% of the sales go to 20% of the population. And those are not, my friends who like to have a beer once a month when they watch the world champion Broncos.
Yeah, and leave half of it there.
Right, leave half of it. But they needed the guy who was drinking Mad Dog 2020 at 12 years old. You know that.
Right.
So what we have found is that, and again, this is a function of commercialization and of the industry and really targeted marketing campaigns. In fact, there's a dispensary conglomerate in Denver right now called Sweet Leaf that's running an advertising campaign that's simple. All it says is smoke weed every day.
Oh, I remember. Yeah.
Yeah, it's everywhere. And listen, I don't care who you are. I don't care how old you are. If you're over 26, fully developed frontal lobe, don't drive, don't let kids see you. I don't care what you do in your privacy or own home. But nobody should smoke weed every day. It's not good for your brain. So when you got these advertising campaigns saying this, now you have 33% of these people. I worked with an individual recently who was, and this is pretty incredible to those of you who know anything about this. He was smoking between 6 and 10 grams daily. That's nuts, but it's starting to move a little bit more towards norm because we are undergoing these campaigns in Colorado that say stop the stigma, normalize use, like anything that's bad or potentially bad for your brain or body needs stigma associated with it so kids don't do it.
Well, but I mean, and when you put it that way, Ben, it's like not even the Budweiser comes out and says drink Budweiser every day. Now they might insinuate it and they subliminally,
right.
But they don't go that far. I mean, so this is where it comes to the irresponsibility of so, and it almost says like it's almost backwards because back when we were talking about below 10%, and we're talking about a plant, and we're not talking about synthetic, and this new marijuana, which acts as a synthetic or is going towards that. It was more recreational back then before it was legal.
Oh my goodness, yeah. And I mean that's the crazy thing about this whole deal is everybody, it seems like, wants to make these huge, broad, generalized statements like it's awesome, it's fixed everything, it's fantastic, it will fix everything, it could fix everything. And the reality of anything is that you got pros and you got cons. And what people need to consider is in this particular conversation, do the pros outweigh the cons? What I have determined after studying this ad nauseum, I mean, it's kind of my whole life, is no, it does not. And I'm not, believe me, I'm not coming to this from a church lady wagging my finger perspective. I'm coming from this as a recovering drug addict.
Right. Well, and the idea of that with so many aspects, socioeconomic from the social injustice to the economic, as far as really, I mean, we've got traffic jams 24/7.
Oh, Denver's wild when it comes to the economics of it. There's a lot of people moving here and probably a lot of people moving here for the weed. And so housing prices are going up. You can't buy light industrial in Denver anymore. I mean, that stuff's going for 3 times asking all cash the second it goes up because there's so much gray and black market marijuana being produced here in the state. The issue is like, who do we want coming to town? And I think there's a generalization inside of something like that. But if somebody's moving here just for the weed, but the other side of it, even the economic thing, is what's the flip side to that? I mean, you've got the homeless shelters in Denver who are way, way over what they can hit. There's a million articles about it. You Google it, you'll find much more articulate than me. But there's a cost to every benefit, and the idea of taxes and there's big detractors to all of that as well. And again, it takes so much time to discuss them. I think you simplify it down to do we want another commercialized vice substance being sold by kind of the rich and powerful to the rest of us because they know they can make $1 or $2 off of us.
Right, and it does seem, you know, I even know people that have businesses in warehouses that have been informed of rent going sky high. Well, either you pay or else I'm going to have, you know, they want it for grow space.
Oh, there's so much money in it.
Yeah, and it's like, you know, that and then, you know, the homeless rate is going up, and we're not talking about, you know, skid row drunks and addicts. We're talking about families. We're talking about and the cost of living in Denver and is high.
And it's an interesting thing when you consider the boom bust history of this state and of Denver in particular. But one of the wild things is kind of looking at long-term economics associated with. And this country is so terrible at doing this. We think about quarterly returns. And if we are really, really forward thinking, we might think about next year's returns. It's all we think about. We're not thinking about the 5, 10, 15 year. If you have associated reductions in IQ, if somebody starts using in adolescence that are almost exactly equivalent to lead paint poisoning, about an 8-point reduction in IQ. Again, the earlier somebody starts, there's a lot of variables, but roughly.
Right.
That's a really big deal for the long-term economic viability. Now, there's a million exceptions. A young man asked me in California a couple of weeks ago, well, wouldn't music really suck if there wasn't weed out there? And then, sure, Jimi Hendrix might have been like not nearly as cool. But at the same time, we can't keep making decisions about the one-offs.
Right.
We got to think as a whole. The more weed we smoke, the less likely we are to send people to college and to have people hold good jobs.
That's huge bottom line, you know, and it's you know, it's a factor that I agree with, especially within within our society today, and it's become more prevalent in teaching our young people because, you know, one of the sayings or one of the things that I hear is all the time is, oh, that's so yesterday. You know, well, you know, and maybe the long-term thought is the problem, is that, you know, we didn't take into consideration this idea of what we're doing to our young people and what they're doing to themselves as well. The economy, it's a huge thing. When we come back, we're gonna find some more. We've probably got time for one more segment on this incredible issue, and I'm so grateful to have Ben Court with me in studio on KUHSdenver.com. Conscious Conversations. We've got some more music for you right after this.
Maybe we can talk about the data. I don't know, people get bored with that. But
it's crazy that you mentioned that earlier about this subject. I mean, it'd take like 6 hours minimum.
Oh goodness.
Yeah.
Minimum.
If you're at an intellectual conversation about it, not an argument, but just to know all the actual, because that's what I do at home. I just sit here and read. I'm like a read robot. I'm kind of like how you are with all that data and all that. I'm like,
there's some cool stuff.
And I try to tell my friends, I go, the proof is right there. If you can't understand the truth, you need to understand the facts because they're right there in front of your face.
Well, the problem is the science has gotten so watered down because there's so much money behind it that it gets difficult for people to seek this out on their own because you got to weed through it and you got to. But one of the biggest problems was in data collection because we had no centralized data collection repository in the state prior to. We still have no centralized data collection repository. So what this is piecemealed information from all over the state, and different people track things differently, like different counties do. So there was no baseline data measured, and there has been no up through. The best we can do is go back and isolate a few things and come out and say, okay, I can tell you about poison control, but I can't really tell you about overdoses. Like I can tell you about fatalities on the road where the drivers tested positive prior to, but we only tested about 15% of blood in fatalities prior to, and starting in 2013, now we test about 50%. So anything we're going to be able to see are going to be trends at best for the next 5 or 6 years, and you got all these other states saying, look at Colorado. It's great. Let's do it. Like, give us
like to smoke weed every day.
Right. Right. Like give us 10 years, and if we are the canary in the coal mine, are we singing or are we dead?
Oh, that's huge, dude. Yeah,
straight up. That's a straight up truth.
And we don't know. We like again. I'm pretty sure that I'm pretty sure we're going to be justified in the end of this thing, but at the same time, I can't.
It's like nobody really knows. I mean,
nobody really knows right now.
Yeah.
We can start to see some trends emerging that are DUIDs are. So I'll go to Oregon next month for the state DUI conference to talk just on this subject. So there's no roadside breathalyzer, right?
See, yeah.
Consider the economic incentives. If I were to invent a roadside breathalyzer that could tell me if you were intoxicated when you were behind the wheel, every municipality in every developed country in the world would buy as many as I could make. The fact that we don't have one, and there's not even anything kind of close on the horizon, shows you how complex it is to measure intoxication for this in a roadway. So what you've got is, we can say percentages of drivers who tested positive, that means had it in their system, we see about 150% increase from 2013 to today. So we can say probably more people are dying because more people are driving high. However, there's no 0.08. It's fat soluble. It affects men differently than women. It affects white people differently than black people. It affects fat people differently than skinny people. It is so complicated. We're never going to have a quick breathalyzer.
Nope. And the fact that it stays in your system for so long, I mean, you don't know whether the guy smoked 2 days ago or if he smoked an hour ago. I mean,
we can actually, with super chronic use in blood, it's gone past 60 days now because it's so much stronger. So where it used to be a hair follicle test was the only thing that could get you much past 30 or so, you can find the blood 60 days later.
Yep.
Which is nuts.
That's crazy.
It's the DSM. It's these little things that give you an indication of the direction. But the DSM, which is the desk reference that psychiatrists use for mental health conditions. For the first time ever, the last ideation that came out last year, the DSM-5, included cannabis withdrawal. Never, ever, ever were there billing codes for cannabis withdrawal because it wasn't a thing. Like, maybe you would have it happen, but it wasn't a thing. And today, it's a thing enough that insurance companies are reimbursing hospitals for treating it.
It's crazy because I've actually witnessed with cannabis withdrawals in friends that reminded me of substance withdrawals. I was a substance abuser for 20 years, and I'm like, this is starting to look like cocaine and meth, and
it's a lot of the same symptoms.
The attitudes, everything. It's like wow, scary.
So, you know, again, it goes back to me, the recreational use, that the idea of legal recreational use has gone out the window.
Yeah,
because it's a different, it's it's gone because it's, first of all, it's a different drug. It's a different product now. And the lobby is spending our intent on creating more demand.
through more dependence, plain and simple, because the casual user doesn't pay the bills. And if simply the casual user does not pay the bills. So what people think about, and most of the arguments in favor of, are really arguments for decriminalization, which I have no problem with. You have to keep penalties in place for the multiple offender, because if somebody who doesn't have an issue gets told, if you get in trouble again, it's going to be big trouble, they're going to stop. But if somebody does have an issue, then we need the ability to intervene legally. I mean, I wouldn't be here today if it wasn't for that. But what we think about is decriminalization. We think stop arresting people. Like, we had done that in Colorado. I mean, up to 2 ounces was a fine. It was a $150 fine. You didn't even have to appear.
Really?
Yeah.
Even before this?
Oh yeah, even before medicinal.
Wow.
So what we have done is taken this idea of decriminalization, which I got no issue with whatsoever, and allowed it to be replaced by commercialization.
Mm-hmm.
It was slick, and I don't know that it was slick. It's the Drug Policy Alliance. It's George Soros. There really is like a deep, dark, bad person behind the entire thing, and his name is George Soros.
Well, you just answered a huge question of mine, and that is the fact that, you know, I mean, I was driving downtown last night. I was going out, and I was in the area of, you know, 29, about, you know, between Park Avenue and Wilton, going to 29. I mean, by Cervantes and all these places where a lot of young people hang out. There wasn't one car that I passed that wasn't lighting up.
Like, seeing them actually consuming in the cars is the craziest for me.
Right, and it's like, and I'm saying I don't think they know how to. Don't think they know how to gauge it yet. How are they gonna pull you over, and you know, certain people are gonna know what they can function on, right?
I'll tell you how. It's called a DRE, a drug recognition expert. And a DRE with probable cause is the only way you can get this. And this is really interesting. I just thumbed through this. We had to do a lot of crazy things in the state. Like, we had to retire all the drug dogs in the state because you can't train a dog to unsmell something. And there's been no monies allocated for any of this. But increase in law enforcement officers trained to recognize drug use. Okay, so in 2006, we had 32 DREs, drug recognition experts. It's a big commitment to train a cop to be a drug recognition expert. So a lot of money. I'm still trying to figure out exactly how much. 288 today. We've had to increase.
Wow.
And that's half of what we think we need.
Wow.
Because what happens is, it's all interesting and confusing, and you can go down lots of legal rabbit holes, but we do have implied consent in Colorado, so they can draw blood, but a draw blood can't prove intoxication. So what they do is they call a DRE into the scene who says, this looks like this, it looks like that. And I do a lot of training. I have what's called a post-certification, so I can train law enforcement and then get continuing credit for it. And the constant thing I hear from cops and prosecutors is, if there's anything else we can charge with, we do, because it's so hard to get a conviction to stick for this.
Oh man.
Because it's just a DRE.
Yeah. Wow.
Then there's a time limit for the blood draw as well.
If you were driving in Colorado, a time limit for how long it stays in your blood?
No, to do the test, to do the actual blood alcohol It's got to be done within a certain perspective amount of time before it becomes invalid.
Probably.
Legally, only legally, it's still going to be there, but after so many minutes, and someone wants to draw my blood and it's been past that time allotted, it's illegal. It's against my constitutional rights.
I believe it. I don't know exactly how that works. I know that in getting a driver's license, we all consent to allow our blood drawn, but I don't know the time of frame. It probably has something to do with how it's kept too, because you can't. Well, you don't draw blood on a roadside because you don't want a bunch of cops.
Yeah.
But I think you also have, like, I'm sure chain of command or chain of possession is really important for that.
Well, Ben, we're gonna have one more. It's gonna be one more. Basically 12-minute segment, and it's going to be kind of like that'll be our last word. And you want to go into the issue of DUIDs and or how it affects because I like the the drug affects fat people, skinny people. I mean, I love that whole idea. Or how do you want to wrap up?
Whatever's interesting to you, because my perspective's skewed on this. I would like, I guess, kind of some final thoughts on the whole thing.
Yeah.
That this is not, one, commercialization is not a foregone conclusion, and two, it is not what people think it is. We're not talking about simple decriminalization. Like in Colorado, example after example of it, we have given the keys to the kingdom to an industry that is not being regulated.
Yeah.
And this industry now, run by really rich white guys, wants to get richer and go to other states.
I think that's huge. Because that's the truth. And I think people need to hear the truth.
And then you move away from because ultimately, I mean, I have a really hard time telling people, do this and don't do that and do this. But I can make some big blanket statements and tell you, like, corporate America is a bad thing. And corporate America selling addictive substances has kicked this country's butt. Back off.
Mm-hmm. I think that's excellent, because I go back to I love what you said. It's the canary in the coal mine.
Yeah.
Yeah. Really.
Give us
and are we willing to wait around? And I don't. There again, it's people feel so unpowered to do anything, to do any change, but at least speak up or something. There is that voice out there.
Oh yeah, and I mean, it's a board of directors I'm on called SAM, Smart Approaches to Marijuana, that's trying to let science inform it. But just in the last 2 weeks, I've done an interview with a French publication and a Danish publication, because everybody's saying we need to know what's happening in Colorado because the conversation's here.
Mm-hmm.
They don't realize it's still the DPA hiring people there to do with the Drug Policy Alliance. But telling them all, like, just breathe a minute. Like, I do probably as much international press as I do national.
Yeah.
And keep telling them, like, give it a minute, you guys. Like, Germany, stop being in a hurry. California, stop being in a hurry.
Mm-hmm.
Like, good policy, if that's what we want, is never knee-jerk.
Yeah, and if we are the experiment, I mean, then you better watch us and learn from us.
Give it a minute.
Yeah. It's it's a. I think if there's the thing I learned, it's just probably what I kind of knew is that, yes, like we were talking about, what I learned is there's so much to learn. Where do you begin? Where do you?
I can give you a list of reading material.
I am. I very much. I took. I'm going to get these. I got these over here. These resources and.
These are good.
Yeah, and it's a subject that I'm very very. I'm passionate about, because again, it's just me. It's just me. I have learned so much about you know, a person's sobriety is a person's sobriety. And
Right.
I'm thankful for that because I was kind of myopic in the first
Right.
years of
Which was
in
good
the
for
rooms.
you, I'll
Yes,
bet,
I
right?
needed that. And now I'm good, you know, and because of the whole idea that, you know, that is defined is that conscious contact with God.
That's
And
what it's about.
That's what it's about. This has been unbelievably fascinating and educating, and I can't thank you enough
Oh, for sure.
for coming out and doing this. It's I can't wait to listen back and hear all the things and see and hopefully maybe do it again sometime.
Sure.
You know. Um,
My wife is, so I'm really, really strict with what I'll do and won't do, and turn down stuff for family dinners all the time.
that's
And my wife said 2 days ago, she's like, so hang on, tell me why you're leaving the house at 9 o'clock on a Sunday. And I said, sweetie, it's local. And she was like, oh, you gotta go. Because I don't do local nearly enough. We have to be
I
talking.
see. Well, we're going live. Ben, I'm gonna let you wrap it up. And that's Kansas Ballet Song on KUHSdenver.com. Well, I want to take a moment and thank my guest, Mr. Ben Court from Cedar, for coming in and taking on this huge subject. This is something that he's used to doing, and we were talking about how long, and we're trying to do this huge subject in these 10-minute segments. But from the bottom of my heart, and for all of my listeners, and worldwide and around Colorado, thank you for coming in, Ben.
Very welcome, sir. Thanks for having me.
I wonder if you would be so gracious as to kind of help us put a cap on our conversation this evening tonight, because one of the things that we kind of got down to is that we're talking about a huge money-making industry that is basically not being regulated.
Yeah, the lip service that we're given to regulating these guys in Colorado is shameful. They have a seat at the table in all of the rulemaking committees. They have a say, and sometimes, more often than not, they have a majority seat at that table. They say that we're holding them to all of these standards, when in reality, we don't even begin to have enough resources in place to start to hold the standards that we're creating. Responsible regulation, there was a group in Colorado that just tried to, for example, we have never studied, and by we I mean mankind, the collective knowledge of humanity ends at about 16% THC and what it's doing to the brain and body. And we found some pretty disturbing things with that. It was actually published in the Lancet Journal in February of 2015, anybody who wants to read it. And since we've never studied more than 16%, there was a group of people in Colorado here who tried to get it on the ballot to say, okay, let's cap it at 16%, which still is like so much more than anything you would ever find naturally occurring, and so much more. It's 5 times what it was when I stopped getting high. And it got absolutely railroaded by the industry and shut down, and some really crazy backroom dirty political stuff happened. But they wouldn't even let now Coloradans say, okay, actually this is getting a little bit out of hand here.
Wow.
So I think if I can leave a parting shot to the folks listening, and so cool that they're listening all over the world, give it a minute here in Colorado, because we did a very, very poor job in measuring data and considering outcomes, and we're just finally starting to do it and learn some things. We're called the Great Experiment. You know, everybody says this is an experiment, what's going on. I like to think of the old canary in a coal mine.
Yeah.
You know, you can't just wave the canary in the mouth of the mine for a second and say, well, he's doing fine. You got to set it back there, and you got to come back and you got to take a look at it. So everybody who's rushing ahead even in America right now, how California is you're going to spend about $25 million on that campaign in
Right.
California to legalize
Oh, man.
it. And it is, they're not doing it out of the goodness of their hearts. They're doing it because it's going to make their bank accounts fatter. So I wish everybody could kind of take a step back and say, all right, let's kind of wait and see what happens in Colorado, and let's give this thing a few years until we see it. We just had our first retail stores open up in 2014. Like, give it a minute, you guys, and let's see if it's amazing, fixes everything in the world that we're being told by the profiteers that it is, or if those of us on the other side of it, who I think are taking a little bit more temperate and scientifically based perspective, see if maybe you realize you can't have all good without some bad too.
Well, and at the very least, I mean, again, it sounds like a very layman term, but it's like at the very least, it just doesn't seem to think that we thought it through, and even, and how do you do that even? And even if you were to think it through, Ben, and try to look at all the ramifications, you can't. But really, it's been. What what's the data in Washington so far?
It's actually, it's not good, but it's not nearly as bad because they have a much tighter control in the retail market than we do. I mean, it all comes down to retail. And you can, if this is a direction that the world wants to move, and I actually have a chapter about this whole thing in my book, which hopefully will be out soon, but if this is the direction we want to go, I personally would love to see the eradication of poverty take a higher priority than this. I would really love to see if we could fix some things over in Syria and deal with some of the refugee issues that are springing up worldwide, probably because of poverty and extremism. And I'd love it if we focused our collective energy on that. But if we don't decide to do that, and if we decide it's more important for us to get high, smoking weed, then there are so many ways we could do it better. I actually helped the state of New York write their medicinal language, and it was good and it was thoughtful, and we've given some counter language in California, but the problem is it's not folks writing it who are concerned with the well-being of society. The people
Bingo.
writing it are the lobbyists.
Right. It comes full circle once again, and to the dollar, and that's. Unfortunately, that is the bottom line. It maybe it seems unfortunate that it may always be the bottom line. But now this is your Sam. It's explain Sam to me again. Smart.
I'm on the board of directors of an organization called Smart Approaches to Marijuana.
Right.
That's a bipartisan, made up of some of the best scientific minds, of which I am not one. I've just learned how to repeat what they've taught me, and I can read. Some of the best minds in the country, and what it's really emerged as is kind of the voice of reason, I hope, because what we have on the other side is, and if you want to know who the deep dark is, the big scary lobby, it's called the DPA, the Drug Policy Alliance out of New York, whose executive director in a recent TED Talk actually described the global drug market, and not just, it's on their website, not just weed, meth, heroin, crack, cocaine. He described it, these are his words, Ethan Nadelman in a TED Talk, described it as a global commodities market that was underdeveloped.
Oh, wow.
Put that in your pipe and smoke it.
Yeah, that just and then and that basically hurts my heart. I mean, because you don't want to think that actual I don't know, darkness is out there, but it is.
It is.
And
that means we get to be the light, though.
That's right. And now, does this group were you acting as a part of that group when you wrote that medicinal policy in New York, or was it was that mainly on your independent?
I just kind of did it, but a lot of us do work like that who are involved with SAM because we advocate for the medicinal use of. And we actually advocate for additional research into so that people can be consuming something in a non-smoke format that is backed by good science and not put together in some guy's garage and filled up with pesticides.
Right, and that gets into a whole nother, you know, I talked to a good friend of mine when he was helping get me in touch with you, Ben, Stephen Wilkins, talking about how the marijuana combusts at a higher level of heat to where and things, and he was blowing my mind with this stuff. He's saying basically
He's a really smart guy.
Basically, this is giving you cancer. I mean, it's putting carcinogens in you worse than tobacco.
It's interesting because we haven't established a link, and we haven't. But yes, the combustion rate is really interesting. But there's that's a really long conversation.
Here we go again. And you know, and with our last 2 minutes here with this mega subject, you know, I feel so blessed because, you know, I've heard things over this evening that are so profound. And one of the things that I'm so happy about that it comes back down to a simplicity, Ben, a simplicity of basically why you and I are recovering, and my engineer back here too, D-Rod. You know, we have this basic idea of, okay, well, what's first? And first is this constant contact with our higher power, and the idea that it's more important to think about our human brothers, than the almighty dollar.
Well said, sir.
You know? And when it comes down to that, if we can keep it that simple, then we got a chance. And then there is a voice of reason. And well, I'm just in awe of this evening, and I want to thank Ben's wife.
Me too.
for letting him come on this show. Bless your heart. It's been great, and it's been an absolute pleasure and an honor to have Mr. Ben Court on with us here at kuhsdenver.com. You're listening to Conscious Conversations, and we'll be talking more about this. And as soon as one of the things I'm gonna ask you to do, Ben, is to let me know what is the name of your book? Do you have a title yet?
Yeah, it's called Stirring the Pot, and it looks like HCI. Actually, the folks who did the Chicken Soup for the Soul are going to be putting it out.
Oh, that sounds terrific. Well, I will be getting a copy and telling people of our audience how to get a copy. Once again, my heartfelt thanks and gratitude to you for being here tonight, and we'll close with a couple of messages here on Conscious Conversations, and then get back to a little bit more music before we say goodnight. So, this is Conscious Conversations on kuhsdenver.com.
See, the question I always ask myself is, what's more scary and dangerous, the substance or the money? Because
always the money.
Yeah,
always the money.
Because the money will cover everything.
Yeah,
it'll hide everything. It'll cover everything. It'll convince. It's crazy, man.
It's not
that corporate American thing, man. It's out of hand.
Thank you. And take all of the issues going on south of the border, and it's not the drugs doing it. It's the money.
The money
doing it. It's the money.
The money.
Crazy.
The money.
Glad Steve hooked us up.
Oh man,
yeah,
I appreciate
Good
it.
to hang out.
Very interesting.
Thank you.
Yep.
And tell your wife if she wasn't listening that I do appreciate it.
I'll tell. Let's see. Oh,
how about you got about a half hour?
Well, 2 hours around the world. That was cool.